In these examples, we're going to look at changing the subject of a formula when the formula is slightly more involved, when there's maybe 2 or 3 steps. And you can see here we're asked to make J the subject of the formula, so we're asked to put J on its own on one side of the equals sign. So for our first one, we've got this formula which tells us that we get P by multiplying J by 3 and adding 2. Now you can think, if you asked, if somebody told you to guess your number, and you're told that they multiplied their number by 3 and then added 2, and their answer was, say, 23, what you'd do the reverse of what they said. So if they times by 3 and added 2, then the last thing they did was to add 2. So you can do 23 and do the opposite of add 2, is to take 2, so that takes us to 21, and then you divide by 3 to get your answer. And it's the same with changing the subject of a formula. So on this one, the last thing that was done was the add 2. Now we know that because of the order of operations, times comes before add. So we're going to take away the 2 first. Do it to both sides to keep the equation balanced. So we're going to have P take 2, and we're left with 3J on the right. Now it's just the one operation we have to think about. It's 3 times J, so we need to do the opposite. We divide by 3. So for our answer, I'm going to use the fraction bar to indicate divide. It's just J on its own on one side of the equals sign, and so we've made J the subject of the formula. That's our final answer. Let's have a look at question 2. It's a similar kind of question. Here it's been multiplied by h, that comes first because of order operations, and then we've got k subtracted. K was subtracted second, and so when we change in the formula we need to do that first. We're doing it in the opposite order. So let's deal with the subtract k. What's the opposite of subtracting k? It's to add it on. So on the left we've got k added, on the right the k's cancelled out, just leaves us with hj. We want j on its own. It's being multiplied by h, so we do the opposite operation. We divide by h. And again use the fraction bar to indicate divide. Just left with j on the right. So j is the subject of the equation. Right. What about these two? Now on this one we can see we've got brackets there, and so we know the order of operations tells us that we do whatever's inside the brackets first and then what's on the outside. So the last thing that's been done to this one has been multiplied by 3, so we cancel that out by doing the opposite. So now we're left with r added on, so we take away. Notice that on the left it's m's been divided by 3 already, and now we subtract r. We subtract r from all of what we've got, so we're going to write the r after it. J's on its own is the subject. How about question 4 now? So on this one we've got a divide sign, or of the fraction bar, which indicates divide, and we know that division comes before addition or subtraction, and so it's the take away h came second, and so that's what we're going to have to do first. We can do the opposite of take away h. Now we've got j divided by 3, and so we need to do the opposite of divide. Now notice on the left we're multiplying everything that's on the left by 3. So to show that that's the case, we need to put k plus h in brackets on the right. J is the subject. Okay, last couple of examples. On these ones we've got a square and a square root. Now this is to do with indices or power of when we think about order operations, and so that always comes very near the start of operations, only brackets comes before that. So that tells us first of all we need to deal with the t added on. So we've got e minus t equals j squared. What's the opposite of squaring a number? Be careful on this one. It's the square root. Now, when we square root j squared, that undoes the squaring. It just leaves us with the j. But be careful on this one because everything on this side needs to be square rooted. So I'm going to write down the e minus t first and then put my square root sign round it. It's all of that that's square rooted. J is the subject. We've finished. Now for 6, squaring and square rooting, they follow the same kind of principles here. It's just this j that's in the square root, so it's just the j that needs to be squared, and that the square root comes first in order operations, then adding w. So we're following the opposite order when we rearrange the equation. So we're going to deal with this plus w first. So that just leaves us with the square root of j. Since everything on the right hand side is square rooted, then we can square both sides. So I'm going to square all of u minus w. So to show that all is being done to, we need the brackets. Square root of j, when we square that, that undoes the square rooting, just leaves us with j. We've changed the subject of the formula.